Welcome to Sales Chatter, my friends, and welcome to Wednesday's episode, Data Day Wednesday. I got here. I don't know if Instagram's going to go live this morning, y'all. Oh, there we go. We are live on Instagram. So here is Data Day with. Oh, sorry, wrong way. I'm all confused this morning, everybody. All right, let's bring everybody in.
That was the best introduction ever.
That conversation just totally messed me up before
right
the call,
off the
boys.
rails.
Right off the rails. I mean, this bad boy hit the ocean. You know what I'm saying? Like we went from inland rail right over to the ocean.
That's,
Crazy.
oh crap!
Good morning.
Yeah,
Good afternoon.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Yeah, lots to
Lovely.
talk about.
Yeah, lots to talk about. Lots to talk about. And oh boy, I'm still getting over that. So just for everybody watching and listening, there is a backstory to what just happened there. The first 1 minute of a total debacle of a show that we've been doing for years that all of a sudden seems like we just started to put play and said, let's figure out what to talk about. We were having a conversation in the back end that just turned into an all-out comedy show, and then realized what time it was and hit send and was still in the comedy mindset, giggling my arse off inside. So Dean and Jeff, thank you for that, brothers. I appreciate that. I needed that this morning.
Likewise.
Just so everybody knows, we were talking about the Suez Canal. We were talking about the pirates, and there's a video going around where there's this boat. Like, so if the pirate ship was this, if the military warship was the size of my office, the boat was about this big. And this boat of pirates is like, let's go. And there's these like 80 millimeter cannons that shoot 1,000 rounds a second aiming at them. Like, turn around or else. And they're like, no, nope. We can make it. We can make it. And then they just got totally obliterated in the water. And I'm sorry, we're laughing at people dying, but
I know.
And the bodacious scent is even laughing, talking about being on the naughty list. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man.
But
that was
anyways,
so funny.
For all you pirates out there that are watching, just maybe turn around when you see the word.
Just do a quick view and get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Let me think. A little fishing boat with a 300 horsepower whatever they call them, engine on the back versus a aircraft carrier or destroyer, a U.S. military destroyer. Well, hey, if you're a betting man, the odds are.
Yeah, really. All right, let's get into the real data here. Let's go.
Yeah, all right. Sam Hunter, real people. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cook.
Yep.
So I know I watched your show yesterday with Jason Miller and Ken, and really interesting, brother. It was a great conversation. You guys looked like you were having a lot of fun, the four of you. You want to just fill us in and what we're looking at? I know we were going to do a 2023 recap, and then we're going to talk a little bit about an outlook for 2024, and we've got about 25 minutes to do it, and I'll shut up.
Yes, I'll start with Jason's view of the world, which I highly respect his opinion and outlook, because he's, as I've said before, tenured and doesn't care who he offends. He calls it exactly as it is. There's the sort of analyst you want, someone not selling anything. And then we'll talk a little bit about what Chris Kapler sees, because I think that'll feed into what Jeff's seeing on the shipper side, or the shipper, buy side. So Jason, we started off 6 months ago talking about second half of, the second quarter of next year being an optimistic recovery point. He doesn't really see that. I think the data would tend to line up with what he's saying. He doesn't. So he summed it up by saying slow first half, better second half was sort of his best case scenario.
And does he have like an estimate as to what slow means? Like kind of same as we've just had, like a status quo kind of moving in, or slower than the status quo has been?
No, I think flat. So flat from where we are now, right? So like no significant change, because a lot of the data points that he spoke to were, reporting volumes are down. And he mentioned construction, chemical and paper production flat year over year, but down 10% from early 2020. Wood products down 5%, machinery down 6%. And the big residential construction industry, of course, is down. It's in a stalled pattern at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not making as much food. We've got less produce. And that's, of course, compared to last year, which is still coming off the pandemic influenced market that we saw, where things were much higher. So your year over year comparisons, you've got to be careful with those. But his overall freight index has demand pegged at slightly above 2019 levels, a little bit higher than 2019 levels, which is again where we think we see the market settling back down to. Auto sector, it's one of the industries that carried a lot of freight volume last year or this year. He thinks that'll decline next year as dealers start to sell off inventories.
Mm-hmm.
His summary was first half, very little activity. Second half, he used the word opaque. His summation, I tend to agree with him. It's hard. We made a comment on our signal report and our freight forecast for this year that it's increasingly hard to read the tea leaves. Normally, seasonality in trucking is a pretty good bet. It's hard at the moment because the Federal Reserve has to start cutting interest rates before we start to see any meaningful movement in the market. Normally, it takes 9 to 18 months for an effective drop in interest rates to take effect. But because the reaction to interest rates going up last year was so swift, he's confident that he thinks it'll be June. We'll start to see, it'll be June before we start to see the Fed proposing interest cuts, not March, as has been touted by some people in the media. So I think that
can I address something just on the automotive, Dean, for 1 second? So having a conversation with a friend of mine that works at one of the big three.
Yep.
And my wife was having a conversation with her. She's been laid off for 4 months. The plant is closing for retooling because they're switching to electric vehicle.
Right. There you go.
And apparently she said there's multiple plants across Ontario and Canada doing that. And I said, like, how many truckloads a day? Like, how many deliveries a day? And she said, we were probably 10 to 12 a day of parts.
Huh.
So, you take that. And I mean, we're just talking that she's at one plant in Ontario. Do you know what I mean? And which has multiple plants. And then there's multiple plants across Canada and across the US. And it'd be interesting because obviously looking at that, that's 4 months, December, January, February, March.
Yep.
Right. So there's all of Q1. Whoever was doing freight to that location doesn't have that freight anymore.
Exactly.
Not only that freight, but you look at like the Magnas and all the other companies that support that plant.
Yeah, all the tier ones.
No longer have that.
Twos.
Yeah, and that's a huge amount of business, right? 10 to 12 trucks a day coming in delivering, like, door handles, because they were a full assembly plant, right? So all the pieces are coming in from everywhere and they're assembling it and they're retooling. And then my brother-in-law is at a major robotic welder supplier. And he said the same thing. He says they're gearing up for a new round of tooling because the tooling for electric vehicles is it needs totally different welding facilities. And so he's like, we're busy because they're retooling. So it's like one market drops, the other one catapults. Do you know what I mean?
Here's another thing, Dan, that you have to take into consideration is what do you call it? A depleting current inventory, because now they're changing the whole models. So they're going to have outbound freight because they have to alleviate all those parts that they were doing prior to the retooling, empty the shelves to bring in the inventory to stock up, to start up the lines.
Yep.
So you figure how is that going to impact? Now, also, when you think about the retooling, it's coming at a bad time of year because what happens in the first quarter of every single year? Get Dean?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes down. It's not a high point in the industry. So now you've got this complicating everything else where carriers were relying on auto parts. It's not there now.
And then it extends to air cargo, ocean carriers, containers,
All of that.
imports, and intermodal, because carloads are a big
Absolutely.
intermodal business. So I think this is it's a really interesting point there. I'm glad you mentioned some of those anecdotes there, because that supports what Jason was talking about. He went on to talk about specific components on certain lanes, and I think that's something we're going to have to watch next year. So not a great story. I mean, I guess the good news is that they do see some optimism that the market will return to normal. I mean, it has to, right? It has to turn at some point. I think the overall theme from the show yesterday was that Jason said that never in history has supply leaving the market turned the market around. It's always been a demand-driven event.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, as he's been saying all year, he doesn't see any major event on the horizon that will change the
Demand.
mechanics of hauling more freight. We need people to manufacture more, build more, dig more holes, all that sort of stuff.
There's no aha moment.
Yeah. So barring some sort of massive geopolitical risk and, the Houthi rebels start attacking infrastructure as opposed to ships, if they started attacking...
Which isn't at all, I mean, if they're going to attack warships, why not infrastructure? It's probably easier. It doesn't shoot back.
Then start to have a big impact on global oil supplies. So we're not without risk, but we've had some pretty big upsets in the market in the last little while. In the Middle East in particular, a lot of our oil comes from, and diesels continue to drop against, a lot of predictions, including mine. I thought there would have been a much higher risk premium added into diesel prices. Because we're producing so much oil here, diesel prices continue to fall.
Mm.
So,
well, you know what? I am glad gas prices are falling, because it's coming into snowmobile season and they take premium fuel.
Yes.
So I am really excited about that, to be honest with you, considering oil. Just to give you guys an idea, so 4 liters of snowmobile 2-stroke oil. Okay. I used to get it pre-COVID for about $35. Like I do it in bulk, right? So I save my bottles and they go and fill them up in bulk. $35. Last year, before the season, I went and got 5 jugs filled up. It was $82 a jug for 2-stroke oil. Now, obviously, I didn't ride last year because I was sick, so I have all that oil this year. So I don't know what it is this year, but I'm telling you that catapult in, and I can only speak for, the oil I put in my sled. I don't, I know my oil changes have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, so Sam Hunter says real people, and then there's Nerf. Good morning, ladies. Nerf, man. I have a confession to make. I thought your forearm read Malkin. I apologize for not.
He's a Steelers fan. Not Steelers. What is it? Penguins. Penguins fan, is it?
Penguins, yeah. Can you stoke it 3 times? Does it make it cheaper? Nice. Nerf, love when you're on the show, buddy.
So I'll just finish off the thought about yesterday's show. So Jason's summed up. It's on YouTube if you want to listen to some of the details. And Chris Kaplis was pretty consistent from a shipper's perspective. He thought they were in a holding pattern, have been for several months. He used the analogy of Groundhog Day. Not a lot of change from a shipper's perspective. They are waiting for the other shoe to drop. They expect something to happen. But he used a very interesting metric, and it's one that I don't know how you quantify, but he used the metric of unsolicited calls from brokers and carriers to shippers looking for freight. And they are on the last Shippers Roundtable, they asked the question and we get a response. We have a poll. But it's a show that we run where there's no media and we don't publish any of the results. We don't record it because they're all, our shippers sharing some of their internal operation metrics. But what Chris said is on our call from 2 weeks ago, that the call volume of inbound calls by brokers and carriers soliciting for freight was still high. So I can't give you the data behind what high means, but it certainly wasn't going the other direction, which was we're not getting any calls. So they took that to mean that people are still looking for freight to move.
Absolutely.
The market is still softening. He said that, again, truckload capacity leaving the market won't cause the market to turn, but they don't see demand picking up any time soon. He did say that shippers weren't they were reluctant to do long-term bids. This is sort of a segue to Jeff's feedback on this. They weren't looking to do long-term bids because rates are still falling in the single-digit range. So why would you do a 12-month bid and lock in a rate that could be lower? So they're kind of, I'll use the analogy I've used before. It's like sitting on the fence. You get a rear end full of splinters, and what's happening is a lot of them are sitting on the fence.
It's a good analogy.
It's a great analogy because it's happened to me before.
I know. It's either who's sitting on the fence though. Is it the shipper?
Yeah, and then when you slide off, it hurts.
That's it. So you don't want to put yourself out there. Right. You don't want to put them out there, and you surely don't want to put yourself out there. Yeah. So that's why they're shrinking those RFPs. Just to be cautious, to be extremely cautious right now.
Yeah. I used another term this week to describe the wind. I said it'd blow a dog off the chain, and someone said, "What? What do you mean blow a dog off?" Well, we had sheepdogs on our farm, and we put them on a chain on a run, a wire that goes for like 300 yards, and they can run up and down the dog run.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, we've had dogs get blown off the chains on occasions on the farm because it was so windy." And they said, "You're nuts. That doesn't make any sense at all."
It does. When a pit bull goes off a chain, you don't want to be around. That's pretty much the environment that we live in right now. Everybody out there is a pit bull, man. They want to just chew up everything they possibly can. And that's what's happening when those volumes are going up, man. They're just going nuts. They're off the chain.
Well, you look at some of the brokerage companies, brokers are laying people off. They're carrier like Matheson or whatever it was, you got carriers going out of business, you got brokers laying people off. It happens, right? It's one of these things. I've even heard a couple of stories now, believe it or not, about brokers screwing around with people's commissions.
Oh,
that's horrible.
It's horrible. I had a call from a buddy of mine last night where he's like, "Hey, listen, can I get some help? I'm being," and it's a third call this week, and it's Wednesday, from people I know that said, "Hey, listen, can you direct me in the right way or give me some advice? I'm getting screwed on my commissions." I remember when I was at a company, we were doing a lot of warehouse business and things started to get tight. And the company just arbitrarily decided that we're changing the commission structure for warehouse and just put it into effect. And we're all sitting there going, "What? Are you kidding?" And it was knocking 6-7 G's a month off my commission statement. And it's a big hit. And I'm hearing it a lot more that companies are holding back. They're starting to say things like, "I'll pay you when I get paid." I have one call this week where I guess a student, as opposed to a colleague, more of a student, said, "I'm not sure what to do." They just put into effect that commissions are going to be paid based on who's paid us.
Right.
And he's like, "I'm expecting a commission check on X day in December, and now I'm getting a third of my check because they just hit it with us 2 days. So nobody had any time to start calling customers and say, pay your bills, pay." You know what I mean? But customers are starting to extend bills as well. So there's all these little trinkets sprinkled across the industry.
So this is sort of the fallout at the bottom of this freight cycle that we're in, right? Where everyone's margins are getting compressed. But also on our show yesterday, we had an interesting discussion with a large carrier this week, and they are, so their one-way network is not as robust, but the growth in their business is dedicated contract freight for shippers. And we sort of asked the question why, and why would shippers do that? Well, it's to lock in capacity. It's to make sure they lock in service. And so so what that means is there's less freight in the spot market. If you look at FreightWave's outbound tender reject index today at 4.48%, kind of historically low for this time of the year. Normally it'd be triple that. And when it was closer to 3 maybe a week ago. So there is a little bit more rejection going on in the market. But if you're a large contract carrier accepting 96% of loads you're getting in the middle of December, 1 week to go until Christmas, that to me tells you that there's not a lot of freight falling through routing guides into the spot market for brokers to move. So there's that going on also on top of flat demand, maybe flat to decreasing demand. So that's why that feeds into, Dan, I think, why brokers are seeing much lower volumes this time around.
Hmm. And it's like anything, right? When volumes drop, all of a sudden the calls pick up because
Yeah.
people got to fill the pipelines and they got to fill their quota and they want us to
Yeah.
keep making the money. You know, Robert actually, hey, Robert, Mr. Peterson, how are you,
Mr.
buddy?
Peterson.
Robert asks a really good question, guys. He says, "What type of recourse would an agent have? They are usually tied up into a contract that says that what the company will pay. Isn't that a breach of contract?" So here's what I always say. Like, Rob, if you're, and I'm sure Dean and Jeff will agree with me, if your company's screwing you around, just change companies. Go to one that's going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated, right?
Okay.
For recourse, I've always said when it comes to recourse, is it worth throwing good money after bad? You know, I mean, when we had our brokerage company, opened it in 2005, and when it collapsed in 2008, because of the economy, well, mainly my ego, but the economy as well. We had a client that owed us $120,000.
Wow.
And they're like, "Oh, you guys are dissolving. Okay, have a good day." And they just walked away from the debt. And I remember saying to my business partner, "Screw that. Let's sue the hell out of them. Like, they're a large US corporation." He goes, "Okay, Dan." He goes, "So do you really want to throw good money after bad? Like, these people have 15 lawyers on staff. We have to hire a lawyer." And so we elected to walk away from the 120 grand. And it burned me inside for a good year and a half. I know, which is crazy because it's a huge time to live with this, but it was like, but I've just realized over time that, you know, do you really want to throw good after bad? And the strategy that I've always said is just go out and find somebody that's going to treat you right. And even if you have to start over, like I know a lot of people are terrified to start over, but I've always said, would you rather be where be at this place you are, continue to get throttled by the people that you're employed by, or would you just rather go out and start something new and just say, "Okay, I'm going to wash my hands of it, and now I'm going to start from fresh"? And I know a lot of people don't like that answer, but
Dan,
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to start fighting with your employer?
No, but Dan, it's a godsend, and here's the reason why. It tells you the financial stability of the business that you're working for. If they have to go and do that, that means that they are cash flow poor right now. That's exactly what it's like, telling you, here's the door, take a fucking hike, get out of here, because we're going to be closing up, or we just can't sustain. We're not sustainable. I mean, that's a godsend to me. It'd be like, see you, man. Like you said, why would you pour money or whatever, or just to have a job to get less than what your value is? The hell with that. Never devalue value. You know what your value is. Go. Take off, man. You'll have a better chance out there. Or even better, start your own business.
There you go. There you go. I know we're cutting short on time, Dean. Did we do you have anything else when it comes to data?
Yeah, one data point I wanted to share. I'm doing writing a piece the start of the year on wrapping up where carriers ended this year, but I couldn't explain 2023 without explaining the prior 5 years, because we ended up in 2023 because of what's happened over the last few years. It just wasn't an isolated market and a freight cycle. It was a freight cycle that started 3 years ago, but it really started in 2018, 2019. And I had, so I've done a 5-year chronology. Where carriers ended up this year, if you take the benchmark that I've been running for owner-operator long haul, they ended up breaking even at the end of the year. They were making about the equivalent of $3,000 a year gross profit, which wouldn't even pay for a set of drive tires. And they ended up losing about $3,000 a year, the equivalent of $3,000 a year in the second half of the year. So started out okay, ended up, not terribly bad, but not making enough profit to get by. And the net result was breaking even. So that contrasts to last year. Average gross profit would have been 42,000. The prior year it was closer to 100. 2019 it was like negative 2,000. 2018 it was like 38,000. So there's this roller coaster ride of profitability that we're seeing, but we're coming back to levels of profitability that we saw in 2019 for carriers. And I think with carriers continuing to exit, large contract carriers are still slow rolling their driver hiring and level of capacity to meet demand. So they'll continue to contract their capacity levels. Rates will continue to fall on the contract side. and spot market capacity. I think the marginal carriers that joined late in that 2021 cycle or continue to exit. So we're still in the down cycle in terms of losing capacity, both spot and contract, certainly in the first half. But I really think the first quarter is going to be really hard for a lot of carriers that are marginal right now.
Oh my Lord. Did you guys see this?
What?
Holy crap. Look we just spotted Santa in a Peterbilt.
Santa drives the Peter.